go ahead and get started here. It looks like most of you have already had a chance to drop your email address and your name in the chat. We want to welcome everybody to drop stuff in the chat as we go through here so that we can have a conversation. We want to have a conversation tonight around the idea of promoting failure. I think that many of us have had experience with personal failure and professional failure, especially maybe over the last few weeks here as we've started experiencing dipping our toes in the world of digital learning with our students a little bit more because of school closures. But we want to go ahead and have this conversation together so that everyone can share out their ideas.
All right, so we'll introduce ourselves. I'm Cameron McKinley. I served as the 2007 Alabama State Teacher of the Year. I'm currently a technology integration coach on a team in our district. And I get to work with the high school, but I also get to work with the other coaches, elementary and middle, when we team coach. And I'm an online programming teacher.
And my name is Dr. Melissa Farrow. I am the 2016 Idaho State Teacher of the Year. I currently work full-time as a middle school science teacher. I teach 6th, 7th, and 8th grade science, but I also serve as the part-time STEM coordinator for my district.
Okay, so, whoops. There you go.
So we have a few session agreements here that we want to just share with you that we hope will make this a productive and enjoyable conversation this evening. If it's possible for you, I notice most of you do have your cameras on already. We would love to see your bright smiley faces. Sometimes it's difficult to read body language and make sure everyone's comfortable participating. So if it's safe and possible, we'd ask you to have your camera on tonight. We're happy to have questions, comments, and conversations. We want this to be a really organic conversation. You can mic in, you can drop your comments in the chat box, whatever feels comfortable for you. However, if you're not currently speaking, if you'll make sure you stay on mute, it looks like everybody here's got great practice working with Zoom meetings recently, so you're all on mute. That's fantastic. Don't let us do all the work. We definitely want to be guiding you through this conversation, but we are not the only experts in the room tonight. You are all experts on this and you bring something to the conversation. So when we break out into small groups, become the facilitators. And then we really want you to feel like your participation tonight is valuable, and we want this to be equitable. This shouldn't be us talking at you for the next hour. It should be a conversation that we're all having together. So those were our session agreements.
Okay, and these are our learning goals. Of course, we always have to have learning goals in a PD, right? So we want to make sure that you leave the session with at least 3 strategies for encouraging failure as a positive part of the learning process. And we also hope you're going to leave the session with a network of educators who share your interest in this topic, and they'll serve as a future resource for future strategies that I'm sure we're all coming up with during this time. So those are our learning goals. And we also want to know where you're joining us from tonight. So we're going to try doing this a different way tonight. We're going to use a Google map. So you can either go to bit.ly, and I think Melissa's going to drop this link in the chat too, bit.ly/map4voya, V-O-Y-A, map4voya. And you're going to end up on this Google map, and all you need to do is type your city and comma and a state right here, and it'll find you. And you just click add to map. So I'll show that real quick. Let's get to my map. All right, so you would just put, say you're from, I don't know, Dallas, Texas. You would just click it. Once you're done, you click add to map right there, and it'll appear over here. And if you want to have a different little symbol for your icon, then you can click the little, you can change the color, you can choose another icon. You'll notice that I chose a hiker, if you can see, hold on, let me get to Alabama. So I chose a hiker. I'm over here in Hoover, Alabama, a suburb of Birmingham. I chose a little hiker because I love to hike outside. You can see the paw print up there from Melissa. Where's your paw print? There you are. So basically you should be able to, and if you're having trouble, just put your city and state in the chat and we'll get it up there for you. Any questions about this? Everybody's busy putting their name in the chat. Oh, I'll put this up again so you can see it. Whoops.
Well, it's in the chat box if they want to just click on it.
So it's in the chat box too. And remember, you just type your city and state, click add to map, and then you can go over here and get the paint bucket and choose a different icon if you're not happy with the one that was chosen for you. And again, if it's causing trouble, just put your city and state in there and we'll get you an icon. Let me refresh. I probably need to refresh. Oh, wow.
Oh, look at all those people showing up.
I just didn't refresh. I should know better than that. Y'all have to refresh. Sorry, I'm making y'all sick with my zooming in and out. I should use the plus. Okay, so this is great. We are covering the country. We have some great ideas coming tonight. I like some of the, oh, another hiker. We have another hiker. Yeah, Colorado, that makes sense.
Oh, I like Anthony's over here.
What is Anthony's? I can't
It's
see.
a martini glass.
Oh, yeah.
It's going to be one of those kind of conversations tonight.
So we are covering from east to west coast and in between. So that's great. Appreciate you doing that. This is a great way also that you can share information. You can put things inside the place mark, your name, school, and have a visit. So we have a network now. This map will still be available for you to connect with these educators. So thanks for doing that. Okay.
So we wanted to start our conversation this evening with a statement. There's no right or wrong answer to this statement, but we would like to kind of take the temperature of the room tonight. And we want to find out if you think that there is a relationship between failure and a growth mindset. You can agree with that, you can disagree with that, or you can admit to being undecided. We've got a great QR code there if you want to scan that to take our Google poll here. And I just dumped the link into the chat box, or you can see the bit.ly website across the bottom in yellow. So take a minute and think about, as we get started tonight, is there a relationship between failure and a growth mindset? And if you can't get the poll to work, dump it in the chat box. We'd also love to hear from you about why you might have entered your answer. If you agree, maybe put in the chat box why you agree. If you're undecided, maybe dump in the chat box why you're undecided. And then you disagreeers can dump in the chat box as well.
Okay, this is what it looks like so far.
Wow. That is an interesting temperature on this room. So it looks like we have lots and lots of people who are agreeing with this. Somebody want to come off of mute for a second and share with us why you agree? Allison?
Sure. I had agree simply because I feel like for myself, not just for my students, but thinking as like someone from my side, you know, or even as a teacher point of view, that if you're not willing to take risks and have this growth mindset in mind, that you're not willing to fail and fail harder, right? And fail better each time. And so the more I've been a part of this group over the last now 2 years, I can see that more and more, the more I'm willing to grow, the more I'm willing to accept those risks. And with those risks can come failure, can come challenges. So I think they're absolutely kind of in cahoots with each other.
I love that idea of failing better. Somebody else, we've got a lot of agreeers here. Does somebody else want to share? There's some great comments in the chat box that I'd love to hear.
I totally agree. I mean, I think, you know, that's the whole gist of growth mindset is how we react to failure. You know, in a fixed mindset, failure is bad. It's what we want to avoid. But in a growth mindset, we know it's a learning opportunity. It's a chance to grow. That's the growth mindset.
That's true, definitely. How about our disagreeer? If you're brave enough to share with us, what do you think's going on with this statement?
Or undecided.
Oh yeah, or our undecided person. I think I saw the undecided person in the, oh, Haley. Haley, do you want to share with us about undecided?
Yeah, sure. So I just said undecided because I think it really depends what you do with the failure. If you quit when you fail, that's not a growth mindset. But if you do something about the failure, then yeah, it's a growth mindset. So I think it just depends what you end up doing after you fail. That determines which kind of mindset you're using.
That's a good point. Well,
Thinking about it as a process.
I'm going to go ahead and, since we did introduce growth mindset and we said we were going to give you some resources, I wanted to show you these resources. Hold on just a sec. Hey kids, webinar. Okay. Okay, all my kids are home. So this is a mistakes reflection activity. And I think this is good for teachers or students, just reflecting. You can respond to the prompts and what happened, what were the consequences, and did you have the opportunity to correct it? And then you start remembering your words that you said to yourself before, immediately, afterwards, and then how would you like to reframe your self-talk? So this activity kind of gets you into a growth mindset. The second was a scenarios worksheet. And this is just like, this is one example of, you hear a student saying to one another, what a dumb question, don't you know that already? Or a parent. There's a scenario with a parent. I know he's really struggling with, he's never been good at it. I've never been good at it either. Think about how you would help turn that mindset around into a growth mindset. And the final resource is a checklist of growth mindset teaching practices. And we all know what they are, but sometimes we forget that this is avoid sorting students, setting that norm for growth mindset, and then especially how we do feedback and assessment. And all of these resources we're providing at the end of the webinar. There will be links to where I got these from, in addition to a number of other resources they have on the site, plus a huge amount of other resources that we found for you. So, but speaking of feedback and assessment, Melissa's going to take us there for our next slide.
So we're all kind of living in this brave new world right now that we call post-COVID-19. And I think while it's easy to be really overwhelmed by what's going on in education right now and really stressed by what's going on in education, there's a lot of uncertainties ahead of us. I think one really positive, transformative thing that we can take away from where education is heading post-COVID-19 is the idea that things are going to have to look different in the fall. And I think we're being placed in situations where we're being cut loose from some of the boundaries and restrictions that have been placed on education, and given a little bit of freedom to do some of the things that we really know are best for kids. And I think one of those that is directly related to our conversation tonight is that many districts across the United States right now are stepping away from the process of grading. They're asking teachers not to give their students formal grades or not to grade on work that's happening during the COVID-19 school closures, but instead to focus on giving students feedback. I think in my own district, this opportunity to start having conversations with students that are feedback-based rather than grading-based, or where I'm attempting to put something in a grade book, are really powerful. Because I think they're giving me that opportunity to let my students know that learning is a process and that their iteration should be part of it. So does anybody have some experiences in their district right now where you feel like maybe because of COVID-19, you're going to have opportunities to assess students' learning rather than grade them?
And I see that Anthony had said the example of the parent saying, my kid isn't good at this, is one of the largest obstacles to a growth mindset. I agree. And then
answer your question. This is Kristen from Connecticut. I'm a high school teacher. And my district is really trying to push the idea of teachers for exactly what you're saying about focusing on feedback and mastery of content or concepts, with the idea of, retakes and multiple submissions. We've been doing distance learning for 8 weeks, and my students are really starting to push back on it. They want grades, they're attached to grades. And so it's been interesting because those of us that are trying to dig deep more into the feedback part of it are really running into resistance from the teenagers a lot. So it's been an interesting juggle. And being in Connecticut, we're in school until the middle of June. So we've got like 7 more weeks to go.
Kristen, do you think that's because of students' expectations or parent expectations that are being transferred on to the students?
I think it's really hard for a lot of teenagers to separate the two. Where do their own self expectations begin and end in comparison to either their parents or, for some kids, more importantly, their peers? A lot of my students that have their identities wrapped up in being, a top 20 kid or, a National Honor Society kid, and their identity is related to their grades, they're having a real struggle right now with that. They're also having a real struggle with pass-fail opportunities because my kids that are consistently, the real hard workers, not necessarily the smartest kid in the class, but the kids that are working really hard for their A's, now are looking at it like, but everybody's going to end up with the same grade, even though they didn't work as hard as I did. And that has been an emotional struggle, particularly in the past 2 weeks, for a lot of my students.
That's a really interesting, it's a culture shift. How are the cultures in some of the other parts of the country dealing with this? On one hand, sort of an opportunity to introduce more feedback, but on the other hand, having to help students strip separate their identities from their letter grade.
So in New Mexico, we're doing pass-fail completely. And we're doing the whole feedback thing, just like the rest of you are. But the problem is because it's pass-fail, and if they already passed the quarter, because they came up with, if they pass third quarter, they pass the semester. So I'm losing my kids. Even some of the really high achieving kids are just like, it's more fun to watch Netflix or go hang out in the backyard with my dog or something. And so every week I'm getting fewer and fewer kids that are coming, except for my AP kids who are like panicking right now. But other than that, all my other kids they're really, it's really hard to get them, even the really high flyers, to get them motivated to do some work because they're not being graded for it. And it's not fair. I got 100% and he got a 60, we get the same grade. It's really hard to motivate it. It's really hard.
I see a lot of people shaking their heads.
Yeah. I think there's been a lot of conversation too about scholarships, kids that are, how does this pass-fail work with that? How does this fit my road to school, as I move on or moving into the next steps of things? We are in a very mixed situation in Colorado with pass-fail, grades third quarter, everything counts to the end. It's all local control. So there's no commonality there, really. And it's been a struggle, especially when you have neighboring districts like where I am, where you've got students competing for the same scholarships and the same opportunities. And you've got kids in one district that are like, man, pass-fail. And then some panicking because they know that the district next to them is not. And they're worried about what the judgment call is going to be on some of that. And it's hard. And it's hard to go through that and see. It's literally across the road. We're talking across the street, 2 high schools that are next to each other. So it's putting this real dichotomy in schools. We see our middle school kids in some of our upper elementary that are in that engagement piece that are like, yeah, doesn't matter. But then you have kids that are looking for engineering, looking for scholarships going into the sciences, School of Mines, things like that, that are panicked, absolutely panicked right now. And with the AP tests and the changes in that, they're scared. And so that whole growth mindset failure conversation is swirling around, stressing them out beyond where they should be right now. Honestly.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Well,
so Corey made an interesting comment in the chat box, and I think I want to use this to move us on to the next slide. She says that this might be a good push to change how we use grades. And so we actually, excellent segue, Corey, we'll pay you later for that. We have a really nice video from a college professor a gentleman who's talking about a college professor, and he's sharing how we can use traditional grading systems. We can help students have those letter grades that some of them are needing for motivation, but still at the same point be rewarding things like creativity and then risk taking. Last week we had a really great chat about risk taking. So Cam, will you show that video?
I will.
But there are ways we can intentionally provide experiences for our
Hold on a
students.
second. I'm going to turn up my volume just a second because I'm not sure y'all can hear that enough. So I'll blast you out now. All righty. Go back and here we go.
But there are ways we can intentionally provide experiences for our students to both know and grow from failure. Let me give you an example of a person who I think is on the right track. His name is Edward Berger. He's professor of mathematics at Williams College. And Professor Berger tells his students that if they want to earn an A, they must fail regularly, because he bases 5% of their final grade on the quality of their failure. They must disclose, accept, discuss, and reflect upon each failure. Now, I love this practice because it encourages creativity and risk-taking. And don't we need more of both of those in the world in which we live in today?
So has anybody done anything like that in their class?
I'd just like to say we have scholarly habits as a grade in our district, and I think to some degree risk-taking and perseverance could come from that, because we grade them on both of those in all of our classes. And I feel like taking those risks and being able to step out of the box and being willing to take academic risks is really challenging. I teach middle school, so especially for middle school students who are so interested about fitting in and being a part of, everybody else and being the same because they don't want to be different. I think that it's a good thing that we still grade them in our scholarly habits on risk taking, which a lot of it is kind of promoting that failure piece of, are they willing to take a chance and step out of the box? And if they do it wrong, how do they persevere through it? Which is why we also grade them on perseverance.
I love that. I haven't heard of that from many places, so I'm glad to hear that. That's a great segue into what we're about to talk about in groups.
So I feel good to talk to 18 people. Let's just do it right here.
Yeah,
Okay.
we may just do it here and not worry about breakout groups.
Okay, great. We'll do it. So much for our breakout room. All right, so anybody want to jump in and tell us one of these you already use, an example? Intrigued, you can see the questions at the bottom there. You can throw it in the chat too.
Gamification. I love gamification. I guess it was about maybe even longer, 5 or 6 years ago. I did a thing called a Coursera, which was a free class that you would have to do, and they treated it like a college class, and it was all about gamification and how they use it in the business world. It was taught by a gentleman out of Wharton School of Business at University of Pennsylvania here, and ever since then I just realized the power of our kids, especially in elementary school. They're gamers. They know how to game. They know how to play all those little things on the phone or on the iPad or on their PS4 or Xbox or whatever they're doing. And they're used to working hard for that reward. And it's a really effective tool to use in elementary school. And you see lots of different, apps and stuff that do that, what's that one, Class Dojo and stuff like that, that are these tools to use for younger kids to give them rewards in a gamified environment.
And actually, that is a great, we have a Padlet for you. Do you want to go ahead and let them share on that now? Those that are,
Yeah, I'll throw the Padlet link in the chat box.
So that if you have an idea and you haven't had a chance to share it out loud yet, go ahead and type it up. And if it has a resource that goes with it, feel free to drop it in this Padlet. She's dropping the link there, and you should be able to just add a Post-it here on there while we're sitting here chatting about this. So I love that about the Coursera. So if you want to put the link in there, put that on the Padlet, other people can go take that course and join in. So other thoughts on this? We've had gamification. I'm not looking at the chat right now, but has anybody picked a different one that wants to share?
I will. I used the non-points based rubrics sometime with my freshmen because our I guess I teach mostly math inclined and physics kids who, want to the exact point values and where they're going to, what they have to do to get certain letter grades. And so I try the non-points based rubrics with my freshmen, and you can see their panic just explode on their face because they're not real sure, how am I going to get an A? And I always say, well, it's not about getting an A, it's about what you learn. And they totally freak out for about 20 seconds, and some of them longer. But it's really interesting because I like, and it's probably a very non-teacher thing to do because we all have to have rubrics with points based, but it's so refreshing because when you don't tie values to certain point or certain categories in the rubrics, you get to see what's important to the kids, what they value, and things that you never thought about. Like, I was like, oh my goodness, I would have never thought about putting that in the rubric, or that's fantastic. And so I like that. I like that option a lot. And just to also see them kind of sweat a little bit, but it's, I like it. I like that option.
I love that idea. And
hey, Crystal, would you be willing to come off mic and share with us a little bit about your idea of live feedback? That's intriguing me.
Yeah, I've done, any assignment that you put on Google Classroom now, but it was in the actual class setting where they're working on an assignment with a partner or by themselves. And I'm literally just flipping through the students, and as they're typing their answers, I'll say, well, what about this? Or did you think about this? Or maybe you should go this way. But I asked several of the students afterwards, and they really appreciated the feedback, that immediate feedback, because it kind of led them through their next process.
I let the kids do corrections constantly. So I have freshmen as well, and I have those top freshmen that have never gotten anything under like 100% in their entire lives, and they fail. They don't do well on my tests because I make them that way. But then they can go through and do corrections and get, half back, or depending on, what the deal is. But the process of doing corrections is extremely important to their learning process. And it makes it okay for them to fail, because then they can correct it and they can bring their grade up. So they learn from those mistakes because I make them learn. But I think one of my main goals in life is to kick that whole perfectionism out of those kids before they go on further into high school, because they come to me thinking, that they can't, it's impossible to fail. I hate it. And they panic. But by the time they leave my class, most of them have gotten to be okay with it, which is good. That's my goal. Anyway.
That is so important. I wanted to point out, because these are great ideas, that is an article that we were going to put the link in the chat, but you can also go to the article, this link right here, bit.ly 12 ways, April 2020, and you can see the description if you're not sure what one of them is. So I know that someone's talked about, it kind of talks about why this article was written, but someone's talked about gamification. Here's a live feedback that you were talking about. And the ungrading, and you said you did number 9. No, yeah, you did the non-points based rubrics. So these describe them. So I just wanted you to know that article was there. If you're not sure what one of them is, you can look at it. So
and the link is in the chat box now.
Okay, good. So it's QR code, we have link, and this was what we were going to discuss in those breakouts. So I just want to make sure you knew you had the article in case you're not sure what one is. Maybe you do it and you didn't call it that. So,
I had a message. Jerry might be willing to come off mute and share something with us.
Oh, great.
Yeah, sure. Hey, everybody. Jiri here. I am a high school automotive instructor. So it's a little bit of a unique scenario for me. I feel like sometimes in like the classroom-based portion, I can use some of these fun tools, but like when we're in the shop and we're working live, and by the way, I don't consider failure like the car goes out and only one wheel falls off, and that's okay. That's one example where we can't allow failure to happen, but a failure that is acceptable and I give live feedback on constantly is like a student who is just willing to take that risk of just, putting themselves out there and maybe say, hey, I've never done this particular type of job on this car. And then, oh, holy cow, I accidentally broke something. what do I do now? And, you know, kind of just instantly getting the feedback from me and just learning from that given situation. So it's kind of a unique setup, but yeah, I think that failure is something I look for. I would rather have a student who is trying really hard and breaks something and it costs me maybe $50 out of our budget versus a kid who is scared and stands back and doesn't want to touch anything. So
I like that what do I do now question. That's really powerful. Like thinking next steps, that it doesn't end with failure. I think so many of our students have been trained through academia that failure is an endpoint. I love the fact that your kids are asking that question of what do I do now? Because that's projecting forward, right? That's looking for where do I go next?
Do you have trouble implementing these practices that are non-graded or working within your grading system to put these things in place?
If I can pop in at this one, I'm Diane and I'm an instructional tech coach in Andover, Kansas. And I would say that many of these teachers are willing to try to do in our community. And interestingly enough, now that we are at home, they have more time to actually provide quality feedback. So if a student does a reflection, or what's not on this list, like a number 13 could be an exhibition night, where your students have demonstrations of learning and people come through. I guess it would kind of fall in the live feedback piece. But the kicker of that is when we have times for students to reflect and really figure out what worked and what didn't. We really haven't had a lot of time to do that in the classroom, but now this is the time to do that, where they're having more opportunities. So just a thought around all of that. And if I could just piggyback real quickly on Jerry's piece, buddy, as an automotive shop teacher, a CTE guy in remote learning, this has to be a mindset for your whole world right now. That's what my guess is.
I see a Corey about standards-based grading. Do you want to tell a little bit about that?
We obviously, like in the elementary schools, we use the standards-based, but in 6th grade, we gave letter grades, and our school did not have a common grading scale, which was very odd to me, because some teachers would grade 60-40, 20-80, whatever. So I kind of just stopped putting grades on anything. It was more feedback, but we would spend so much of our class looking at the learning objective and going over the success criterion. What does it look like to know that you know this? How will you show me? How can you show others? And a lot of times they had to take surveys on themselves, like, can you do this independently? Can you teach this? Can you, maybe you need more time. And so I think for a long time, they were really reluctant to be honest and thinking, oh, I'd have more work to do. But over time, the more honest they were, they saw it as an advantage to kind of really being on top of it. And before any sort of assessment, we'd go over the objectives and they would prove whether or not they knew it. And if not, they knew exactly what it was that they needed to do to meet that. So I guess they really didn't see letter grades often. So I don't know, kind of what I've been doing.
That reminds me, Corey, a couple of years ago, as my district started moving towards standards-based grading, they asked science to be the pilot. And so as I was thinking about what that would mean to pilot standards-based grading, I decided to kind of do what you did. I did a year without grades. For an entire year, the only place I put a letter grade was on that final report card that my district at that point was telling me I had to put a letter grade on for, you know, reporting purposes. But I went for an entire year without putting a letter grade or a percentage on any student's paper. I only gave them feedback.
Yeah,
and it was a
so
really powerful
transition with that. There's so much pushback from parents of, well, how are they doing? And I can have that conversation. Well, here are the objectives, here's where they're at. And the students can even chime in at conference and say, well, I've done this, this, and this. And then the parents like, well, how are they doing? Okay, well, I just told you how they're doing. Fine, they're getting a B. I'm like, oh, okay.
Okay, now
yeah, and it's strange, but I don't know, grades drive me nuts. So
that kind of ties into what Anthony said in the chat box a minute ago about Why do we see this change? We're talking about it being really powerful and students being able to have these conversations. And yet, as we move higher and higher up through education, we move through middle school into high school and into post-secondary, whatever that might look like for students, and all of a sudden changes. All of a sudden, we need that grade. We need that affirmation of how are they doing, and we're no longer able to qualitatively have that conversation.
Well, I also think that something else that goes hand in hand with that is, I don't know how many other schools do student-led conferences. I'm a huge fan of student-led conferences, and I find that more elementary schools do them. And as you get higher, not only do student-led conferences stop, but conferences stop. It's like frowned upon at a secondary level in my area that a parent actually wants to come in and meet with me. Are you kidding me? Like, and I find that strange because, you know, if anything, I would love my daughters to be able to lead their own conferences all the way up so they can tell me what they're doing, what they're working on, where do they struggle on, what do they, you know, feel that they're successful at. And because I know that if they could do that, they're fine. You know, it's going to be easy to help them get where they're going, but it's that struggle of, we seem to stop that as we get into higher grades. And I'm not even going to talk about, you know, higher ed, postgraduate stuff. Like that's a whole nother world.
Wondering if that will change now that people feel a little bit more comfortable working virtually, because a lot of times it's trouble for parents to come in or whatever. And maybe a kid leading a conference. My children had them in middle school for one team that they were on, and it was so enlightening and so powerful for them to have to get everything together to prove that they had learned, to show their learning. So just them getting it together was amazing because they had to think about, I was here and I learned this. So it was you know, good for them, but also it was good for me and for the teacher because she had to do less work. They had to do the work and prepare for it. She, of course, gave them guidelines. And the whole team came in. And I think in high school, it's a little bit harder because there's not a team per se. There's all these different teachers. But maybe this Zoom world that we're in now would allow for this. I'm not sure. What do y'all think?
My district has already said that they intend to use the COVID-19 school closures as a reason to rethink how we do parent-teacher conferences.
What about you in high school? Do you think you could see this student-led conference going on, or at least a different assessment that where parents aren't always asking about the grade, where you could actually say, they're doing this. This is what we're trying to learn. This is how much they've learned, and this is where we're going. Do you think parents will accept that, or what do we need to do to get them there?
Cameron, we used to do that in our district when I taught, I guess it's been 20 years now because it's before I had children. We had a whole day, 2 days actually, excuse me, where the parents came in and the students came with them, and it was student-led conferences, and it was fantastic. And but now I think they took it away just because there's not enough time, you know, to get through all that we need to get through. And now it's just like what someone said, it's just negative conferences, you know. So
yeah, oh, you only call if something's wrong. So we have to build it in somehow. Mm-hmm. I'm gonna see what everybody's put on the Padlet while we're here, and just because if you see me looking to the right, it's because I've got two screens and my videos over there. So
well, and I like the idea that Diane just dumped in the chat box about being able to work with parents' schedules a little bit. This gives us more opportunities to have conversations with parents on timeframes that meet their schedules that aren't always when we hold parent-teacher conferences. A lot of the parents in my district work in the evenings, and then we hold an evening parent-teacher conference to talk to them.
Exactly. that doesn't make any sense. And so we need to make it easier for them and be prepared. Here's some of the things that were shared. If you have not had a chance to share on the Padlet, there's a link in the chat. If you want to put it in there again, Melissa.
Yep, I'm dumping it there right now.
Basically, you're just adding a Post-it. I see Anthony added his great free PD on gamification. And I like the marching band. They celebrate through push-ups. Talk to us about this, Allison.
Yeah, so since 9th grade, I did marching band for 4 years in high school, and then I went off to drum corps and toured for 6 months at a time or whatever once I got to be 18, 19, 20. And that was a big deal as far as what we had to do was we had to understand when we failed in drum corps and in marching band. And I happened to have the same marching instructor for both of them, which I was really fortunate to have. And he was like, once you realize you've made a mistake, you have failed at, hitting your mark or hitting it in the right amount of steps or missing a note or whatever, you celebrate the fact that you failed. And the fact that you understand that you have failed and that next time you're going to do it better. And so they never said, you failed, go do push-ups. They said, if you understand you've made a mistake, now is the time to celebrate the fact that you understand that. And I feel like that always stuck with me ever since I was, 13 and in high school marching band my freshman year going, at first I was like, no, I'm not going to make a mistake. And no, that wasn't me, or it's okay. And then, as I matured, I went, wow, no, I know I made a mistake in that moment. And I need to celebrate the fact that I can recognize my own mistakes. I'm not too good to recognize when I have failed. And I'm going to celebrate that by getting stronger and by getting better, which is what we did in drum corps. And I loved it. So every time we would stop, we'd run 30 seconds of the show, the drum major would cut and say, those who need to celebrate, celebrate. And you'd see, like some people go down and start doing push-ups. Like, I recognized I failed this moment, so I need to celebrate the fact that I can recognize it now. And there's a point, right? I mean, with anything, with a sport, like I golf, and I think about that now of, it's hard in the beginning when you're like, I don't know what I've done wrong. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. And when you're at the point of, I recognize what I'm doing wrong and I know how to do it better, you can celebrate the fact that you know exactly what you're doing wrong and how to fix it. And I feel like ever since 9th grade, that has stuck with me my whole life, whether it's been marching band and drum corps or golf or teaching or being a student myself, that I can recognize when I've made a mistake. And it's hard to do, right, is own it, own that failure. But to own it and to celebrate the fact that I can own it and fail better next time, right?
And get really strong.
That sounds just like a failure institute.
It does. That's a good segue again. And so, by the way, that Padlet, you can link to it. We have a link to it in the resources at the end. Everybody's sharing some great things. Feel free to keep, if you think of something after the session, please put it on there because we're all learning from each other. I love that idea. I'm going to be implementing that. So that brings us to hosting a failure institute. And so I'm just going to, you pick a real failure you were able to learn from, and let's listen to this guy go through these steps. All right. Wait, hold on. Let's see. There.
When I took calculus my freshman year, I knew that I was in over my head. I've always been pretty good at math, but the class was really challenging and I found myself falling behind. When I got my final grade and realized I had failed the class, I immediately went to talk to my professor, and she helped me put together a plan for retaking the class and passing it. Over the course of the next semester, I went to office hours every week and asked a friend who was good at calculus to help me with my homework. After struggling with that class, I realized that college was going to be much more challenging than high school. I made sure to carefully look over the syllabus of every class I took, and to set up meetings with professors to go through questions and ask for advice. I managed to get an A- in calculus the second time.
Okay, so this kind of goes over kind of what we started with at the beginning, growth mindset, but reflecting on that failure, outlining the steps you took to overcome it, and showing how you were able to bounce back. So how might that look in your classroom? Well, y'all could brainstorm failures as a class. You could use that reflection form that we showed in the beginning. You could do it with your team first to get in the mood of how to do this, and then use any of these screen capture resources. Flipgrid, which many of you probably heard of. Nimbus not only screen captures, but it also records. Screencastify. Screencastify now has a new beta version called Screencastify Submit, and you can sign up for it. It makes it so easy for somebody to submit a video. And because celebrating these failures, like you talked about in the band, you remember that to this day, is one way to push that growth mindset and to maybe help kids not be afraid of it and not always to think about grades and so forth. And we have links to all these resources at the end that we'll show you at the end. Has anybody done anything like this before? A failure institute or videos of getting kids to share failures? Trying to see it. Oh, somebody put students love Sorry, somebody put students about teacher failures too. So that's the truth. I know that in my programming class, when I'm making a video showing them how to solve something, I'm making it live. I don't pause when I mess up. I'll talk through and say, oh, wow, look what I just did. Here's how I'm going to fix that. And maybe it takes me a while to fix it. And I show them how I'm failing while I'm trying to tell them how to correct a program. So I hope that they'll realize the steps I go to solve something so they can maybe use that when they solve it. So I don't know if anybody has anything like that they do in their class or show kids your failure.
I tell my kids that, there are some teachers out there that, make mistakes. They plan on making mistakes on purpose so that to see if the kids will catch their mistakes, to see if the kids are paying attention. I just tell them I make enough of my own that I don't need to do it. I don't need to plan ahead. I make enough for you to catch all the time anyway. So gets them laughing, and they're very alert, and they always catch my mistakes. It's awesome. And I make enough of them, really. So it's good.
When a kid can find your spelling error or your mistake in a date when you're talking about history, it's like the best thing in the world for them. So, while I don't plan it, and I feel like I'm pretty good at memorizing all of my old white males and dates and the countries that go along with them, occasionally I do slip up and they're like, actually, Mrs. Doppler, that was 1498, not 1495. And I go, we can all learn something.
I do that in my university level courses I teach. They all know they can earn bonus points whenever they find any of my errors on presentations or in my syllabus and stuff like that, because, that just gets them as, teachers in training to be looking for that kind of stuff as well.
Thank y'all. And thank y'all for continuing to share in the chat. We kind of have you want to introduce it?
Yeah, so sometimes it can take a cultural shift in your classroom and in your teaching style to be comfortable allowing students opportunities for failure. And that can feel like a really big transition. It's taken a long time for me to implement a culture in my classroom of failing forward. That's our motto in my class, is that we're constantly failing forward. Nothing is a final endpoint. When a kid asks me something, it's always, what's our class motto? Fail forward. Yeah, let's move forward. But that can be done in baby steps. So we wanted to kind of, as we wrapped up our conversation this evening, share with you an elementary example to help encourage you to start small. These are fourth graders, so no pun intended there. But start small with ways that you can introduce opportunities for students to fail in a positive fashion in your classroom and feel safe and comfortable doing it.
Along these lines, I wish I could snap my fingers and make the view of failure change in all of our minds just like that. But I know we have to start small. So let me give you an example from my school that I hope illustrates this approach. It was our first school-wide STEM day. And the boys and girls in this fourth grade class that I'll tell you about, they were trying to build a zip line that would drop a marble onto a target using a paper cup, paper clips, tape, and string. And I watched as the boys and girls built their contraptions. And after each miss, they would huddle together, make a change or two, and then try again. Now, when Sophia's group failed for the fourth time, she turned to me and said, Mr. Peters, hashtag the struggle is real. Now, I love that sentiment because it shows me that Sophie and her classmates were never at the end of a failed experiment. Rather, they were in the midst of ongoing struggle. They never felt defeated or demeaned because they couldn't hit their target. They were motivated and inspired to keep on going with the challenge. We need to be at the forefront of creating these types of opportunities for our students. The sooner they experience and learn from their own failures, the sooner we will have students and individuals capable of overcoming any obstacle in their way and handling any adversity that is thrown in front of them.
So I love the idea that he talks about failure again as just part of a learning process. We haven't reached the end of learning. We're right in the middle of learning, and we're motivated by that failure to move forward. I really need that little girl to come put hashtags in my room because I think hers may even be better than mine. Anyone have any small experiences with introducing failure into your students' learning?
In the library, I have a different activity for each grade level to do that's like that. Some sort of makerspace / STEM activity where the whole point of it's for them to struggle and figure out how to get to the end. And I start that in first grade, and by fifth grade, you know, it's just part of their being, that they know that's what's going to happen when they're in my room.
Whoops, sorry. Oh, by the way, you can watch the rest of that video and the resources that we were going to get to now.
That's a great example, Scotty. Developmentally, we expect failure from our students as they learn things like how to eat and how to walk. And, you know, we don't expect people to be able to do any of those things, those developmental physical skills. We don't expect them to do those on day one. Why would we ever expect students to be academically ready on day one? So it's really interesting that we've set up this dichotomy in our head of there's some things that it's okay to fail at, and there's some things that it's just not okay to fail at. So I think our classrooms give us a chance to bring that back around. That's a great example.
That is a great example. I kept thinking, I told Kristen before, or Melissa when we started this, that the Roomba robot, I've seen my kids, like, you know, the very first ones were so terrible. You know, they would just go bounce across the wall, kind of like we teach our kids programming. If it hits the wall, go somewhere else, but it never really cleaned the whole floor. But if someone hadn't been willing to put that out there and try it and keep iterating, we wouldn't have the better version of it that we have now. And that goes for so many things. Like Scotty, you're talking about learning to walk first. You have to be willing to put it out there. And I think some of the strategies y'all have been talking about tonight are ways to get kids past grades, past being fearful of failing, to moving towards a culture of failing forward, which is what we want.
And by the way, there's a really great Will Smith video that we didn't have time for that talks about failing fast, failing often, and failing forward. We have a major tech company here in Idaho called Micron that you may have heard of, and the CEO of Micron uses that as his slogan for all of his employees is fail fast, fail often, fail forward.
I guess we do. I don't know if we have time to show that. But I do want to show you where it is. I hope we did add that to there. I hope you added that link. Can everybody see the promote failure link there? There's a QR code for you.
And it just went in the chat box.
Oh, good. And it's in the chat box. So Voya Promote Failure 2020. So that link will take you here. And you'll notice that the Padlet that everybody's been sharing on and can continue to share on, we hope you will continue to put your ideas on there. If you have thought of another one that you want to add, we'll add ours too. This Padlet is right here at the top. These are some inspirational videos that you can use in your classroom. And the one she mentioned, Will Smith, Message on Failure, is an excellent video right here. You can see him talking about fail early, fail often, and that might really resonate with your students because they know who he is. We've also got a number of quotes that you could use, and so that's that part. Then the growth mindset resources that I mentioned, number 5, and I need to put an asterisk by that, is the one that I showed you. I just showed you 3 though. They have plenty of other ones. There's a Khan Academy, has mindset lesson plans, and we've got some other information for you there on growth mindset. Then we move down to our resources on teaching without grades. So the article that we use to discuss the 12 alternatives, that's number 1 there, but there's an excellent podcast, Could You Teach Without Grades? We've got a great blog post about overcoming problems in a no-grade classroom and some other things, why perfect grades don't matter. This is research-based. So I think those will maybe help you, maybe if you need to change the culture in your building. And then finally, the learning from failure. These are different articles, including that TED Talk. The 2 clips that we showed were from this TED Talk right here, but we also have a whole playlist on failure. So if you need to use that. And so these are some really good articles that you can maybe, in your time here during COVID, maybe have a chance to read an article a week or so. And then I said finally, but I forgot to show you the capture tools. If you do want to host a virtual failure institute, there are plenty of tools to use. And I did mention that Screencastify Submit, which is so easy to use. Literally, they click a link and it says accept to use your camera or just your screen, and they can share a video or a screencast telling about maybe a piece of work that they failed or something. And so those are available for you as well to host a failure institute. So we are hoping that you, we said our learning goals were to, you would leave with at least 3 resources. We hope you left with more, and that you have this wonderful network that we've been tonight. And we're from all over the country here where you can, and also we have our Padlet where people are sharing so that you can come back to these people, all of us that are interested in this topic. So hopefully you found some resources that you can take back to your classroom and share.
So as we kind of wrap up this evening, just a reminder that you will get a certificate for your attendance this evening that you can use in your district if your district honors certificates of professional development. So this can count towards an hour of professional development for your district, but it can also count towards any other type of professional development that you're attempting to accrue. So please make sure your email address and your name get into the chat box this evening, and you should receive those certificates by email sometime in the next day or 2. Before you leave tonight, we want to let you know that there is more incredible professional development coming up later this month. As you continue to exist in this post-COVID-19 world, know that you're not alone and that there's a lot of other teachers who are willing to have these conversations with you. Sometimes it can be a little difficult to switch that culture that we were talking about to a positive failing culture. And sometimes you have to be a little bit willing to rock the boat in order to help that shift happen in your building or in your district. So if you will join us on May 8th, at 8 p.m. Eastern time, we're going to have a Twitter chat around what it means to be willing to rock the boat and how you can rock the boat to help change happen in your district. And then we'll have another one of these fantastic hour-long sessions coming up that same week on Thursday, May 14th.
And then, of course, you can see it. We've had sessions all season here, Twitter chats and workshops. So you can go back and watch the recordings of the ones that have already happened, or you can join us in the ones that are coming up. You can see that after Rock the Boat, we have a collaborating with colleagues, and one more after that I can't see because this little slide is in the way.
It's inspiring curiosity and inquiry.
Yes. So let me try to get that off there. There we go. Yeah, there you go. Now you can see. See, I'm willing to just show you my failure right here while I'm trying to host this webinar. So I will maybe learn from this and be a better slide changer next time. Hopefully you'll be able to join for those 2 and maybe watch some of the ones that we've had in the past.
Well, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us tonight. We have appreciated the conversations that we've had tonight and the great strategies that you've all been able to share of what's working and what's maybe not working in your areas across the country. And I just want to thank you for your time. Thanks for spending a really great hour with us.
Yes, if you can unmute and tell us goodbye. And we just appreciate all the things that you offered and shared with us tonight about your classrooms and your schools.
Thanks for all the great resources, you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.